Alright, there we go. I'm going to make a podcast and a video here. So welcome, my friends, to 15-minute free thinking with me, Joshua, or Carpo, or whichever you prefer. As I have been going by Carpo for so long, I just figured I have no problem with my name. I ended up using it because there were so many Joshes. Everywhere I went, there's Joshes. I never see them in the regular world, but as soon as I'm in a group of people, there's like 5 Joshes. Carpo was a nickname from my youth, and I stuck with it. And so it's interesting, I haven't actually made a podcast in a while, and I've been kind of slacking on it. I also haven't really made a video in a few days, which to a lot of people may seem like not a big deal. There's a lot of people who upload monthly or even yearly. But I've been pretty much a daily uploader for the last 10 years on YouTube. I know a lot of people may see that as pointless or useless, and others may think it's a great thing, and to me it is what it is. It's just something I do. It's my way of expressing myself. And I guess that is my way of kind of introducing myself and the channel in a way of segueing into what I'm going to talk about today, which is multifaceted. It has many angles to it, and I'm only going to try to cover these topics without causing too much conflict in myself or among others, because ultimately my goal of talking about subjects like this is a sort of connection or understanding between people. Because look, we live in a small world. I don't care how big you think the planet is or how much empty space we may think there still is available. When it comes to headspace and internet space, it's packed. The reality is that we are social creatures that want to bond over certain ideas. And for a long time, this helped us survive. All the way back into our ancestry, far back before we evolved into the modern humans we are, by sticking in groups and sharing certain ideas, we succeeded in surviving. Now, these ideas didn't always have to deal with conflicts regarding, politics, racism, vaccines, things like this, which now we can't even really talk about. And I'll get to that. But I know my point being here that all through history, mankind has been constantly evolving the way that we do things in this world, and evolving the way what we consider important in our lives. For the longest time, it was simply survival. Nobody was thinking about how to build their economies. But eventually, as things settle down, people start to say, okay, what else is there? So we have this idea of exponential growth, such as in the United States. Basically, to put it simply, the United States, the way we run our economy, is the biggest Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme in history. It's keep pushing until there's nothing left. This has been shown over and over through history with economies that were just run into the ground by the idea that continual growth is more important than just living a good life. That making a lot of money for a few people somehow trickles down to the rest of us and everybody is happier, even though it's the working class that does the work. And I've watched since I was young. I'm 45 now, and I would say I first got into kind of the deeper aspects of society when I was in my mid to late teens. So 30 years or so that I've been processing these ideas, and I found myself ignorant on much of it. I've looked back at some of the things I thought were important in the past and said, wow, I can't believe I thought that was important. But I watched, like a Joe Rogan interview the other day, and he was actually being interviewed by Crystal Ball and Sagar, which do a show called Breaking Points. They used to be on The Hill. But they kind of turned the tables on Joe after he interviewed them, and they interviewed him, and they were asking him about the podcast and what makes it successful. And they got into talking about basically how people just want to hear honesty. They don't want to hear a bunch of bullshit spit in their face by people who pretend they know what they're talking about. And I've made a big effort in my life to not be that guy who tells you this is the way it is. And most of my subscribers know that I never do that. There are certain things that I do set in stone. I mean, there are, dirt is real. The sky exists. I do believe in space. I don't believe in the flat earth. Things like this. I'm not going to argue them, though. I still could be wrong. The point is keeping an open mind. But this brings me to my main point. I'm sorry it took 5 minutes to get here, but trusting in expertise and where that is going. Now, this is going to be a multi-part video. The video part of this will be on YouTube, but I'll be turning the camera off to finish out the part about the vaccines and controversies after this, and it will only be on my podcast page, and I would love to share it on YouTube. But the fact is, I can't talk about these things because if you have an opinion that's outside of the mainstream narrative, you get shut down. And the point I'm trying to make here is that I've been aware of this for a long time, but I wanted to just kind of, I guess if I'm speaking to anyone out there, it's the other people who call themselves liberals, or let's just say the extreme left, whom I've never been an extremist. I'm not left or right, but I am a liberal-minded person. I want to take care of my fellow man. I guess let me just lay this out in a very simple concept for you, okay? I do support my country. I love my country and I love my people. But somebody said, it was a quote I think from Plato. He said, patriotism is for those who don't have, for basically standing, taking pride in a country and a country's achievements is a way for people who don't have any personal achievements to feel like they're part of something bigger. He put it much more bluntly and brutally. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't side with their nation. Don't misunderstand where I'm coming from here. But what we're doing right now is when we call ourselves patriots, we're not patriots if we are assuming that everybody who thinks differently than us is the enemy. That is the opposite of patriotism. In other words, if you're an extreme conservative or an extreme liberal and you think that the other side is the problem and that if only we could get those people out of here, then we'd be a better nation, that is not patriotism. That is bias. And patriotism, if it's truly nation-related, should be supporting your neighbor's views even if they counter your own, because they are also a citizen. So, not to get too deep into that, but patriotism today is propping up a failed institution. And the failed institution is the U.S. government, which is just another in a long line of, several institutions through history that have failed because of their own selfish nature and greed. Like we talk about how bad things are right now, we really have no idea how bad things could be if we continue down this path of assuming that everyone else is wrong. And when I look at a comment section on YouTube, it's just disgusting sometimes. But I realize that depends on the video. If you go to any mainstream news outlet, which I rarely do, and you look at a YouTube video, they have a huge discrepancy, usually more thumbs down than up. In other words, a lot of people who hate media literally go and seek out these media stations. They watch the videos and then they vote them down on purpose, whether they've watched them or not, and then comment some extreme post, which I just got done debating with this guy who had posted something saying, it was about a road rage incident, and the guy said, Tyrones will do what Tyrones do. And I knew where he was going with that, and I'm not going to get into detail on this, but I basically put the guy in his place and then stepped back and said, well, why do I bother arguing with idiots who are looking for attention in all caps, posting some triggering, comment? And of course the guy accused me of being a millennial, and I was like, yeah, it's really easy to make assumptions about each other. And I think I said what's wrong with the world, and we got into a discussion about it. And I say, I've got nothing against people for posting their frustrated posts in anger, but what it comes across as is that everybody feels this way. And the point I'm trying to make in this part here is that don't believe what you see on the internet as the way that people really think. If we do this, we're going to be in big fucking trouble, people. You cannot just watch a video and read the comment section and think this is how everyone thinks, because the people who comment And my subscribers will completely agree with this, a lot of them. I know a lot of you regularly comment on my channel, but I also know I have some subscribers who rarely, if ever, have commented, and others still who have probably watched my channel from the beginning and never commented. Because some people feel more comfortable posting in a public forum and others don't. And there's no fault on anyone for doing that. My point being that the more a person has animosity or frustration or anger towards anything, the more likely they are to post and share their frustrations with the world. This is something I've observed. Most of you have probably observed too. So what I'm going to get into now is the expertise part. We trust expertise, and I would love to trust the, quote, experts, the science behind a lot of these things. But what we've seen over the last couple decades, is that, the elite scientists that work for the government or the corporations are likely to ruin science and scientific discoveries for everyone by cherry picking, basically, data in order to support their causes. Now, the one main blanket point I need to make here first is that the word elite is really misunderstood. We should trust in elites. Like somebody said, I heard somebody interviewed and they said, I think it was Eric Weinstein on a podcast, and he said, and it's the first time I hear people say this because nobody wants to admit this. I've thought about this for years, that, yeah, I want to trust an expert. It's the same reason why a year ago I trusted Dr. Fauci to give me the best information I could find on COVID. And then right now I wouldn't trust a goddamn thing the guy says. Not because of a political issue, but because of the science. And because I've seen him confronted and asked about the lab issue and the leak hypothesis, gain of function research, all of this, which even talking about that puts my video instantly into some strange category. And by the way, that I'll be talking about, all those things in the second part of it in the podcast. But institutions are not trustworthy is the main point I want you to take away from here. Institutions are not trustworthy because they are usually out to protect themselves. This brings me to think of a quote that was from, he said, I would never be a member of any group that would, or I would never join any group that would have me as a member. I think it was Groucho Marx. It always stuck with me because I understood the implications of what that was. The idea that if you join a group, you instantly have to think that you know better or more about something than others. It's just the natural human tendency towards tribalism. So when we have so much division in the country, tribalism will get worse. And therefore, there's no point in even attempting to protect a democracy or a nation when everybody's fighting amongst themselves. And the best way to do that and to make it confusing is to take away everybody's access to information. That goes for both sides. This is Facebook's way of saying that you're sharing harmful information. We're going to ban you from posting. And believe me, I hate Facebook. I haven't used it in years. I hear a lot of people complaining about how Facebook has been, banning them and keeping them from posting and saying it's hate speech or this or that. And it's disgusting. I couldn't imagine I don't even know why I would bother in today's world using Facebook. I don't even know why I bother using YouTube, except it's the only video platform where I can really share things. Facebook may get your shit out to more people, but you're better off on a smaller platform like Discord or something where you can just share with the people who want to hear what you have to say. But back to institutions. The reason we have a problem is because there's no fucking accountability. And I've said this over and over, but it's something I came up with a couple months ago, the two-sided problem of why we have problems with our institutions. There's no accountability and there's no availability, meaning that companies, people, individuals, political groups are not held accountable for their bullshit, for their lies, or their thievery. And, even when it's almost like when a new president comes in, we forget all the bullshit from the past, fuck-ups, and nobody's held liable for going into Vietnam, for going into the Middle East and fighting a war that was pointless over WMDs. And people just forget because there's so much going on. So there's also, besides accountability, there's no availability. You can't go in and talk to your president. You can't go in and talk to your local politician. Believe me, you send emails out to your local officials, your governors, your senators, which we did during the Kratom issue in 2016 when the DEA was trying to ban it. We successfully fought them off and they ended up backing down. But writing the senators, I found you get a generic response email, just like sending it to any other company, and then they don't even respond. You have no accessibility to these people, and that pisses people off. If you're not available to your citizens, whether you're a corporate, a CEO, or a politician, or just a business owner, then people lose trust in the institutions. I've always compared it to the tribal elder. The medicine man, who somebody could go to the end of the village and talk to him if they had a problem. Your medicine didn't work. Let's try something else, right? So trust. Trust is the glue that binds society. Trust is what makes the human species able to survive together. And in the past, we've had the luxury of, say, being able to be racist before the term even had any meaning. You see somebody who looks different, keep them away, right? That's just often how animals operate. Everybody has their own groups. But in the modern day, we're trying to carry on these like primal, divisive, self-protective fight-or-flight syndrome bullshit, and we're putting it off onto the world. And the truth is there are a very small amount of people who are really that anxious and upset. And a majority of people are cool, calm, and collected to the best they can be, and they're not talking about it. The one with the megaphone usually has the least to say. That brings me to a quote by Plato, which was that, if I can recall how it goes, it says, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools speak because they have to say something." And I'm sure you all have completely understand that. Today, because of these institutions and our distrust, we're afraid to get scammed. We're afraid to get ripped off by our neighbors or lied to by politicians. And we're afraid of somebody trying to take our money. I mean, the fact that there are people out there who have entire groups of call centers focused on just ripping off elderly people of all their money. I mean, we live in a weird time and a weird world. It's disgusting, but you can't get wrapped up in the negativity because you got to realize that most people are not that way. To give it a positive aspect here. What's happening right now is that because of the internet and the vast sharing of information, never has there ever been a time when people were so adamant about creating the narrative and hanging on to that. The media has revealed itself as not being able to, get past their evil ways, if you will. I mean, years ago, the media was called out and they said, you better change with the times and you better be more honest and you better get better journalism and stop sharing this bullshit. But when you've got these multi-billionaires who own all of the corporate conglomerates, they only give you the stories you want to hear. So years ago, people who said, the media is all controlled, they were considered conspiracy theorists. A lot of us had to bite our tongue watching this unfold. I know a lot of people have thought that I wasn't aware of these things in the past. They're like, I'm glad you talked about this. And I'm like, well, dude, it's just something I can't talk about every day because it's pointless. It's like complaining about the potential apocalypse or prepping, for example. As I'd mentioned before, I'm a prepper or I have been in the past, getting the things I might need. But you talk about it, you're a fool. Because then what, you get everybody knocking on your door when the shit hits the fan, right? That's just one aspect of it. But more than that, being quiet, calm, cool, collected, and stoic, and just having the knowledge we need is what's most important. Not telling the whole world about it. You're just exposing yourself. For example, it's like the guy who goes on Facebook and brags about all his guns. Wow, you're smart. Cool, man, you can defend yourself. That's going to be great, but you're on a list already and you'll be the first knock at your door if anything ever goes down like you're claiming is going to happen. So it's about knowing yourself and your own needs, right? Trusting in experts is only important if you're not wise. The reason we look to experts for knowledge is not because they necessarily have it, because they're usually individuals. we have to look at the information and be able to see the counter narrative and decide for ourselves. But when a bunch of people get together and they all start agreeing on something, all of a sudden we figure we have more of a basis to believe them. Let's say, you take the Ben Shapiros and the Dave Rubins of the world, and people look up to them because they think they have knowledge. And likewise on the left, I don't know who people look up to on the, what, the Young Turks or something. All these people are just looking for attention, ad money. They're not out to solve any problems we have in our society, nor do they have any answers to the problems that they bring up. It's garbage, in my opinion. But people believe them because they agree with each other. You see a group of people and you think, oh, they must know what they're talking about. And the fact is, they don't. They really don't. And so we descend into tribalism and primalism. We're like in this primordial soup right now, where who knows where we'll go from here. We've become extremely selfish, and we've been gaslighting each other online. And science is not political. I want to make this point before I finish up here. This will be the end of the video portion, but I'll continue the podcast for anybody who wants to hear the part about the vax, because I got my channel suspended last time I talked about that. But science is not political. Science is a method. I was talking with my mom about this the other day, because we've always had debates. She always talks bad about science, and I think we finally come to a head where we agree on a certain concept, that the scientific method is different than the way science is abused by governments and by corporations. In other words, you can take a hammer and you can use it as a tool to build, or you can destroy a house. I was going to say something more vulgar, but I figured that would get censored. It's a weird time to be alive. And the thing with the USA, as I said, we have no plan B, other than to keep growing. And so no matter what happens, it's like this business as usual attitude. And it's fascinating to watch, And one of these things that comes out of it is people are becoming overly sensitive and not even realizing it. Like this idea of being triggered from years past has now become this idea of everything is racist or everything is offensive. And I think that that's just a small side effect or byproduct of figuring out who we are. My answer to this problem would be to choose not to be offended. If you choose not to be offended, you won't be. But yeah, I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. All right, so I paused the podcast version. I'm going to finish up the video side. I'd really like to talk about more of these things, but it's unfortunate. It's frustrating as hell to me that YouTube and Facebook and all these people won't let you talk about certain things without being deemed inappropriate or going against the grain of what the feds want to talk about. And now I start to sound like a lunatic, because here I am talking about, things that were conspiracies in the past, but they never really were. A conspiracy is just a few people getting together and hiding the truth. It's very simple. Happens every day. Every political, group, every presidential cabinet, they've all had their own conspiracies, things that were not shared with the public. So skepticism is extremely essential. Okay? And I just wanted to get that. You have to be skeptical and not take sides, not believe what a big group of people's telling you. You realize that if there are 50% arguing on either side, that means that the truth is somewhere in the middle, every time. So things are never as simple as they seem. So thanks for listening. And if you want to hear the rest of this issue and my discussion about this, I'm going to have it on my podcast. Link should be in the description. 15-minute free thinking. It's on all platforms. And I really appreciate everyone listening. Thank you to my patrons. Thanks to my subscribers. Thanks to my family and friends. And I'll talk to you next time. Be well.